Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game pod from an impressive Timberwolves win over the Phoenix Suns. It had everything. Dominant ant performance, a great bench performance from Nickeil, new rotation guys, Jaylen Clark getting some run, and Chris Finch with his first career ejection. Terrible officiating, which led to said ejection. Lots to cover on the show today. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game podcast from Wolves Suns. Tons to get to. First off the top, big thank you to our title sponsors. That's Game Time. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday, everybody. Yes, it's another Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are in Salt Lake City to take on the woeful Utah Jazz this evening. We'll briefly touch on that toward the end of the show. But this is the post-game pod from an impressive Timberwolves win over a Phoenix Suns team that was nipping at their heels in the Western Conference standings. An important game. We saw some stuff we haven't seen before. Jaylen Clark rotation minutes, Jaylen Clark first half minutes, Josh Bynett getting pulled after one possession, 12 seconds of play. We saw Chris Finch get ejected for the first time in his head coaching career. Like, lots of stuff in this one. We also saw some stuff not for the first time, weirdly, which was Mike Nori coaching on the sidelines in Phoenix at the Suns Arena. We saw weirdly a play where Mike Conley gets shoved by Devin Booker almost into the Wolves head coach, which is the play that hurt Chris Finch in the playoffs last year in this same building. We saw Jaden McDaniels goading on Devin Booker and double technicals in that confrontation's a strong word, but disagreement in the middle of the floor. So lots happened in this one. I've got a lot I want to talk about. We're going to get to all of it on the show today. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder that you can subscribe to the new daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get Locked On Wolves, the newsletter, in your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. One stop for all Wolves coverage, all things Wolves, not just this podcast, but links to other Wolves content, and then also some more broad national NBA content too. Again, subscribe at LockedOnDaily.com. All right. Lots to get to in this one. As noted off the top. I don't even really know where to start. Like this was I guess I'll start here. This is why this game is so important. Minnesota was finally 4 games above 500 for the first time this season. They'd won 3 in a row. They hadn't won 4 games in a row at all this season until this point. Also, they were 1-0 against Phoenix. This is game 2 of a 4-game, season series against the Suns. The Suns were only, I think, a game or a game and a half behind Minnesota coming into the game in the standings. Let's see. I have it right in front of me. They were only a half game behind Minnesota. So if Phoenix had won, they would have leapfrogged Minnesota in the standings. And the season series would have been tied. Now, Minnesota can't lose a tiebreaker to Phoenix. They can only tie it because they've won the first 2 games against them. And they keep the 7th spot in the West. The Wolves are now only a game out of the 6th spot, which, of course, and actually they're only a game out of the 5 spot. The Clippers and Lakers are tied. And they're only 2 games behind Denver for the 4th spot in the Western Conference. The Nuggets have lost 3 straight. The Wolves have won 4 straight. So don't look now, but things are running into form for Minnesota. And this game was big. I mean, remember last year, Phoenix swept Minnesota in the regular season. And it was kind of a worst possible matchup, or so it was thought to be the worst possible matchup for Minnesota in the first round. I thought the Wolves would lose in 6 games. Like, they were Locked On Suns, not to like drag Brendan clean, but like I think on our crossover, I said Suns in 6. He said Suns in 5. Everybody thought it was going to be a massacre. The Suns haven't beaten the Wolves since then. The Timberwolves beat the Suns, swept them in the first round last year. They have beaten them twice this year. So this game started out rather slow and sloppily for Minnesota. They had just 22 points in the first quarter, stagnant offense, some bad turnovers, spotty defense. The Suns were getting to their spots. Actually, spotty's maybe not the right word. I actually thought the Wolves defense was okay. the Suns just got to some of their spots in the mid-range, and no Naz Reid in this game. I should point that out here toward the beginning of the show. He was sick, missed the game, which meant we got Luka Garza minutes in the first quarter. And it wasn't just Luka, because the Suns were getting to their spots when Rudy was in the game too, but it's such a tough matchup for somebody like a Luka Garza when the Wolves are trying to play drop and the Suns are happy to shoot mid-range jumpers. That's like they've got one of the best ever do it in Kevin Durant, one of the other guys who are really good at it in this generation, and Devin Booker and even Bradley Beal from the mid-range. And they got to their spots. The Wolves did an okay job at contesting them, and the Suns made the shots. Offensively, the Wolves were a disaster in the first quarter. They were down 7 at the end of the first frame. But the second quarter got flipped completely. And the defense wasn't quite as good for Minnesota in the second quarter. I didn't think they allowed a few more open shots, some more paint points than you'd like to allow to a Phoenix team that doesn't have anybody that should be scoring in the paint. Like Yusuf Nurkic is not in this rotation anymore, right? Like this is there's really no excuse for the Timberwolves allowing paint points to Phoenix. And actually, they even finished the game. I think Minnesota only outscored the Suns in the paint 54-50 on the night. And a lot of that damage was done early in this game in the first half. And like, I didn't think, and the Wolves got a bunch of block shots. Like Ant had a career high 4 blocks in this game. Rudy had a couple blocks. But like Nick Richards, I mean, Bradley Beal didn't really do any damage in the paint. Like there was just some, also the Suns missed a lot of layups late. So the Minnesota, there were some defensive lapses in this game, to be sure. I mean, Phoenix still scored 113 points. They still shot over 50% from the field. They still had 10 offensive rebounds in this game. There were a lot of defensive problems. But in the second quarter is when Minnesota's offense started to round into form. And it at first, it was just really good ball movement. Ant got some open looks, and the Wolves they started to take advantage of playing a little bit faster, which is something I identified in the show on Wednesday that I thought the Wolves could do in this game. And actually, they did a lot more of it in the third quarter. So we'll get into that. But second quarter, it was picking their spots. And Ant got hot. Then he had a rough stretch where he turned it over a bunch of times in a row. And then this game was, what was it at halftime? A 6-point Suns lead. Third quarter, though, Minnesota dug in defensively and used defense to turn into offense. They killed the Suns in fast break points. They, on the night, were led 18-6 in fast break points. And a lot of that damage was done in the third quarter as they built a lead over Phoenix. They held the Suns to just 18 points. And that's when the Wolves have this, like, suddenly this new look swarming backcourt that got in there. And I want to spend actually a lot of the next segment talking about Jaylen Clark and talking about Nickeil, talking about that just terrifying Timberwolves backcourt defensively that they're going to be able to deploy now that apparently Jaylen Clark's a thing. I can't wait to talk about that. But the rest of the game, it was all kind of, the tone was set by the way the Wolves scrapped in the third quarter. And we have to talk Chris Finch ejection, because this was, in a way, the catalyst. I had the number, but the Wolves went on a crazy run. I think they were up a bucket or down a bucket when Chris Finch got ejected in the third quarter. And then from there on out, the Wolves dominated. And there were some jokes on Twitter about like, oh, coincidence, Finch leaves and the Wolves win. No, it's not because Chris Finch is a bad coach. It's because he knew the right button to push in that moment. And there's some quotes out there. I know Chris Hine had a couple tweets about it. After the game, the players were all saying Chris Finch was angry in film session. One of the players said he chose violence. I think it might have been Jaden McDaniels. I don't want to misdescribe the quote. But Finch, post-game, the win over the Hawks, was angry. Finch apparently was angry in the film session and at shoot-around. He was angry at the refs from the start. Got a technical early in the first quarter. First technical since like October, I think. Only his second on the year. And then stayed on the refs. And then got ejected on a seemingly innocuous play where obviously he appeared to mutter something under his breath. I think it was CJ Washington was the ref that ran him. And it was absurd, to say the least, even without knowing what Chris Finch said. I mean, just stop. But Chris Finch also apparently was happy to engage in a bit of, I don't know if it's, the refs were awful. Like I don't say that very often. And if you're a regular listener, I say this every time I talk about the refs, because I really want to underscore it for the people that aren't regular listeners. I don't talk about refs very often. We're probably up to maybe 4 games this year. I've talked about refs at all post game, on a post game pod. They were horrendous in this game, just atrocious, like start to finish bad, like the worst officiated NBA game I've seen this year. Certainly the worst officiated Wolves game I've seen this year. And it was bad on both ends, but it was worse for the Wolves. It really was. And I call them like I see them all the time. This was brutal. And the kickball at the end got a lot of play, and that was bad. The Grayson Allen kickball. And if the Wolves had lost, that would have been just, I can't even imagine. Obviously, there would have been other things that would have gone wrong. But that was brutal. Multiple other instances of like something happening right in front of the refs and them just completely botching it. And Chris Finch had enough. And then the sparked the team. Like, I've never seen Chris Finch get that fired up. Like he was angrier after the ejection than he was before it. The Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley, did the "we'll hold you back, coach" thing, and it had to have lit a fire under the team as well. And Chris Finch appeared to know what the right buttons to push in the situation are in the season. And look, he didn't do it coming off a loss. He did it coming off a lazy win over a shorthanded bad Hawks team on Monday. And now, the Wolves are better than the Suns, and I know the records are close, but all the peripherals, like the Wolves are just a better team. But this was still a very good win. Now, the next test is what should be an easy win on the road, but it's at altitude back-to-back the very next night in Utah. We'll see how the Wolves respond. But Chris Finch appeared to play this correctly, and it's one of the reasons why when people get on Chris Finch, there's so much about NBA head coaching that doesn't get talked about, that is completely behind the scenes. I mean, what percentage of NBA coaching is actually about the personalities, the locker room, the way you handle players individually and the team as a whole? And for people to just decide that they know everything about Chris Finch based on press conferences is not accurate. It's just not the right way to go about it. Tactically, have there been issues sometimes with Chris Finch? Sure. His first ever playoff series against Memphis, he was completely outcoached. That's the last time take that back. There were some issues last year in the playoffs against the Mavs in the conference finals, but he got them to the conference finals. They won 56 games, and clearly he's doing some stuff right. There's obviously things to criticize, but a huge part of being an NBA head coach is being able to do stuff like this. And I'm not specifically talking about getting ejected. I'm talking about the whole last few days. As a leader, this is a calculated response by Chris Finch. And so far, I'm not declaring the Wolves as NBA Finals champions. I'm not declaring Chris Finch as coach of the year. But this seems to have been the right button to push at the right time in the last few days collectively. And we'll see how the Wolves do over the next few days. Some very winnable games upcoming. But credit to Chris Finch. Seriously. I mean, I think that this was well played by him. I want to talk Dillingham. I want to talk Jaylen Clark. Believe me, I'm going to talk Jaylen Clark. We'll talk studs and duds. We'll briefly talk Wolves Jazz. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our new friends over at TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. Will you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day? An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right. Let's talk rotation. So no Naz Reid meant the Timberwolves are going to be scrambling a little bit at the backup 5 spot. I mentioned Luka Garza earlier. His stint was fine. I actually thought he defended Durant pretty well in a possession that ended up in a Suns bucket, but it was pretty good rotation by the Wolves. I thought it was okay, but the Suns were clearly going to hunt Luka Garza. He's not going to be able to stay in front of Durant, Beal, Booker off the dribble, and he's not agile enough to really play drop effectively against guys that are that dynamic, that don't need space to squeeze the trigger on those mid-range shots. So that was tough. So what did the Wolves do? Well, they tried Josh Minott to start the second quarter to give them some defensive juice. Immediately, first possession, he gets beat backdoor by Devin Booker. Bad technique. He basically tried to get between the ball. It's like how you would teach a kid to deny the basketball on the perimeter, but not how you're going to defend a guy in the corner at the NBA level, right? Where you basically turn your back to the ball and try and deny. But as soon as your head turns at all to look at the ball, there he goes backdoor. And obviously the talent level at the NBA is, hey, we're going to hit the backdoor cutter for a bucket and or a foul at the rim, which is what happened. And Josh Minott got yanked immediately. It was just bad technique. And it was, and Chris Finch had said publicly, I think it was actually before the Hawks game. It might've been before the game on Saturday. Chris Finch was asked about Josh Minott's playing time. And he said, look, there's been some game plan issues. He just hasn't followed the game plan correctly defensively. And that's been an issue, but we want to get him back out there. We believe in him, that sort of a thing. Clearly that, like, I don't actually, as a general rule, Chris Finch lets guys play through things, and he gets criticized. Like I'm going to get on a small Chris Finch soapbox again. He gets criticized like crazy for not calling enough timeouts, not yanking guys, being tough, not being tough enough on guys and all this stuff. I thought this tough love was probably the right solution or in the moment for Josh Minott. Is that bad for his confidence? Maybe. But if it's a clear game plan thing, like, hey, I mean, we don't know what that meeting looked like. It might've been, I mean, not only was it bad technique across the board, but maybe they said, hey, don't get beat backdoor. And then he immediately gets beat backdoor. Right. Like, but that's something that just a mental mistake by Josh Minott. And I'm the biggest Josh Minott advocate. I do think he's a rotation player in the NBA. And if he's not today, he will be at some point. And hopefully he gets some opportunity against Utah. I think it would be a good move for the Wolves to get him right back out there against an inferior opponent on a back-to-back when other guys could use some more rest. Give him another shot. Put him back out there, see how it goes, and see if his energy can maybe be helpful. He'll have rested legs at altitude when everybody else played the night before. He only played 13 seconds, so he should have enough legs. But I'd like to see him get back out there. Then in the third quarter, Minnesota went to Julius Randle at the 5, and Nickeil basically played the 4 in those units. But actually, rewind a little bit. Before all that happened, Jaylen Clark got into the game in the second quarter. First ever first half minutes, first ever non-garbage time minutes for Jaylen Clark at the NBA level. And man, dude can defend. And if you're a regular listener, if you've listened to the show for a year and a half now, I love the Jaylen Clark draft pick when they picked him in the second round a year and a half ago. He was the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago at UCLA, which doesn't happen for guards. And then he tore his Achilles that March, ended up being a second round pick. There were some draft analysts who thought he could be a first round pick, maybe even a lottery pick before the injury. And he didn't play at all last year. He started practicing with the G League at the very end of the year, played in the summer league, and had a couple games where he was just everywhere, and a couple games where he looked like he hadn't played basketball in over a year. And he's been scoring a little bit in the G League. But the thing with him is, I tried to do this on the live postcast that I hosted with Jack, and I couldn't do it fast enough, but I have it now. When they drafted Jaylen Clark, my notes on him were that he is a smaller, less athletic, but more polished Josh Minott was my comp in terms of current Wolves players because of what he brings to the court. He does all the extra stuff. He's got a nose for the ball. He's great on the ball. He's great off the ball. He is a little small for a great point of attack defender, and he's a modest athlete. So again, certainly less athletic than Josh Minott, but I think he's big enough, and he appears to be a lot stronger now that he's had a year plus of NBA weight training. And his defensive IQ is off the charts. He's also a very good rebounder for his size, which does matter. The Wolves don't have very many consistently good rebounding guards. And his offense isn't great, but he appears to have pretty good touch around the rim. And I said this at the time, a good touch on floaters in college, a good cutter, etc. Things that another kind of all defense, no offense, recent Wolf in Josh Okogie never really had touch offensively. He had some good moments shooting the 3. And, for a stretch could suddenly really shoot the 3 for the Suns. But Okogie never had touch around the rim like what Jaylen Clark has. And so I don't want to talk more about him another day, but I think he's also an NBA rotation player. He may not be an every night rotation player now, but he's going to get a shot against Utah. And he's going to have a shot until he proves that he can't do it with no Dante, especially if Naz is still out. But Jaylen Clark was great in this game. They brought him in to guard Tyus Jones in the second quarter. He shut him down. He got switched on to Devin Booker a couple of times, did a great job navigating through screens, stuck to guys off the ball. The stance, Jack Borman had a great, kind of not rant, a great little bit that he talked about Jaylen Clark and how he looks the part defensively in the same way that other guys look the part offensively with their fluidity and just like they were born to do this sort of a thing. I don't think he used those exact words, but that's essentially what he was saying. And that's Jaylen Clark. Like he looks like, hey, I know I'm the best defender out here. And for the Wolves to have another guy like that is pretty awesome. On top of Jaden McDaniels, all NBA second defensive team, on top of Anthony Edwards, who got votes last year for second team defense, for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who we know is a shutdown defender. I mean, Jaylen Clark legit could be one of the better defenders in the league. And like it was great. He was awesome in this game. Rob Dillingham quickly. Rob was good too. He played 15 minutes off the bench for the Wolves. He had a couple, if he had a one bad turnover mixed in there. I think it was just one. I lost my box score. I think it was just one bad turnover that he had mixed in there. Maybe one ill-advised shot, but like there was also a stretch in the third quarter when the Wolves went on that run where he had that behind the back assist to Nickeil for the corner three. Maybe it was early fourth quarter. That was a really great stretch. I mean, he ended up a +3 in 15 minutes, had 8 points on 4 shots, 3 assists, and just 1 turnover. So really nice Rob minutes. I think we're going to see more than 10 minutes of Jaylen Clark on Thursday. I think we'll see more than 15 minutes of Rob Dillingham on Thursday, and I'm excited for it. All right, I want to close with studs and duds. Then we'll touch on that Wolves-Jazz matchup, and that's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Game Time. Attending playoff games for any sport is absolutely an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can use Game Time Picks to find tickets for any playoff game you want, for any sport. Any regular season ticket, since we're still in regular season for NBA and NHL. You can browse through deals. You can find great value for all kinds of seats around whatever venue it is you're attending. The super deal is always especially impressive, offering the best value for the event, whatever it is you're looking to attend. The app's features, such as seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout, make the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee give you peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Let's do studs and duds, and then we'll talk Wolves Jazz. Real quickly. Actually, no, this is related to studs and duds. Let's just get into it. Obviously Anthony Edwards, I haven't even talked that much about his performance, but let's do that. He had 33 points on 11 of 20, 3 of 8 on threes, 8 of 9 at the line, 7 boards, 5 assists, 4 blocks, 2 steals. Yes, he had 7 turnovers. He should not have had 7 turnovers. At least 3 of them were just dumb, ridiculous. One was he wasn't paying attention. Conley threw in the ball, went out of bounds. Another was he dribbled the ball off his foot. He does that like once a game. He's got to stop it. Another was a pass he fired at Rudy that Rudy should have caught, and he kind of threw it up almost like high and away like an NFL quarterback would do, where like only the receiver can catch it. Problem is Rudy Gobert is not an NFL wide receiver, so that's like 50-50 on Ant and Rudy. Some dicey turnovers, but everything else was great. And I already said like that stretch in the second quarter where he turned it over, I actually do think it was 3 straight possessions. Besides that stretch, Ant was awesome in this game. He was getting downhill. He wasn't settling, save for first quarter when the Wolves were in an offensive rut. There were a couple settle shots. But as the game wore on, he got more aggressive going to the rim. And I think it's because he had the correct response to being frustrated by the officials. Yes, he was complaining. But first of all, he didn't get a technical, which in a game where Chris Finch got 2 and was ejected is shocking. Secondly, he channeled that. And instead of saying, look, I'm not getting calls, I'm just going to jack 30-footers, he said, I'm not getting calls, I'm going to go even harder at the basket. Right. And it worked. He didn't get any free throw attempts until like the final couple minutes of the first half, like late second quarter. He finished with 9 free throw attempts and made 8 of them. And the 5 assists, like there were some good looks in there too. There were a couple of very nice passes and at least 1 or 2 that were turnovers that easily could have been assists. Like I don't know. The Ant as a playmaker thing continues to evolve. I don't like there's been fits and starts the last couple of years, right? Where it's like, oh, he's figured it out, and then like he just stops doing it, and then he turns it over a bunch. And right now we're in one of those phases where he is at times trying a little bit too hard, but at the same time, he's seen multiple, 2.5 defenders on almost every possession. So he's got to do it. He's got to move the basketball. He's just got to get off the ball a little more quickly. And that's been a constant theme. He didn't do it well early in the game. He did better as the game wore on. I thought it was a mature performance from Ant. Even with the 7 turnovers, he dealt with the adversity of the terrible officiating in a good way and was a big part of Minnesota winning this game. So Ant is absolutely a stud. Julius Randle, man. Where was this Julius Randle? Like, I don't know. I know where he was in October, November. He was with a new team and trying to adjust. And like, I want to be fair. This is a good version of Julius Randle. Dude's got 20 plus in each of the last 3. He's got 7 or more rebounds in each of the last 3. He's got 6 or more assists in 2 of the last 3, and in 3 of the last 5 games, he has 6 or more assists. Go back even further. If you go back to the Knicks game, Julius Randle has 6 or more assists in 5 of those 7 games, which is nuts. And in this game, he had 6 assists with 0 turnovers. Last time out, he had 5 turnovers. He was 0 of 3 on 3-pointers, but he was 10 of 13 on 2-point attempts and 8 of 10 at the free throw line. Julius Randle had 10 free throw attempts in this game. That's only the 3rd time this season that he's had 10 or more free throw attempts in a game. He was good defensively too. Like, he was switched out on the perimeter a couple times and moved his feet. Like, absolutely looked like he was ready to be a defender. And I was told by the Locked On Knicks guys that, look, he can defend. It actually sounded a little bit like more like Ant than like Cat. Like, Cat was overconfident sometimes as a defender. Like, I can guard this guy on the perimeter. I can block these shots. And he didn't always deliver, although it was obviously always has been an incredible defender against Jokic. Was again, by the way, apparently in Knicks Nuggets that just happened when the Knicks beat the Nuggets. And Knicks beat him by 10. I saw Draymond Green was trying to rip on Cat on Twitter, which is just so tone deaf. I'm not doing that right now. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take the bait that I walked myself into. But my point is, Randle is kind of a pick your spots defensively and can be really good. Like, his ceiling's not as high as Ant defensively, but can be a plus defender, but is usually not because of lack of motivation, not good off the ball, gets lost in the wash a little bit. We've seen the effort kind of wane at times. He was locked in this game, and when he was on the ball, he was good. Like, he was legit good, and he was good the other night too. What was it, Saturday's game? I think he had a couple of really nice defensive plays in the was that the Memphis game? No. That was the Nuggets game. He was good defensively in the Nuggets game. So anyway, Julius is a clear stud in this one. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Cannot say enough. Nickeil has really struggled lately, and it looked like when I did this show after the game Monday, I didn't say these words because I'm not a doctor, but I was worried about an Achilles based on the way that, like, it looked to be non-contact and the way he was limping, and it was his calf, or maybe it was a calf strain. Like, Cat missed 50 plus with the games with a calf injury a couple years ago. And apparently it was just a contusion. And I think he said in his post-game interview today, something like maybe a nerve thing, whatever. He played 35 minutes. He had 23 points on 14 shots, which is incredible efficiency. And he was a plus 14, the best mark on the team in a game that they won by 8. He also pitched in 4 rebounds, had an assist, only turned it over twice. The corner threes in the fourth quarter, Nickeil hit, I think, 3 corner threes himself. Jaylen hit one, which has not been a thing. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago now on the show. The corner 3 regression for the Timberwolves as a team has been super detrimental to their offensive production. It's like the only thing that is worse than last year. And I said at the time, look, these dudes are going to start to hit them as long as it's, hopefully Randle gets a few more opportunities and shoots better from there. Hopefully it's Nickeil will eventually start to hit. Hopefully Jaylen, but I was starting to lose some hope. Jaylen began to play out of the corners, not just shooting threes in the last few games, really. And in this game, he did take, actually, only one of his 3-point makes was from the corner. I think he was 1 for 2 on corner threes, but like enough to keep defenses honest. Jaylen was really good in this game. And if I had a fourth stud, it would probably be Jaylen. Not probably, it would be. He had 14 and 6. 3 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover, only 4 fouls, was able to stay on the court for 37 minutes, was really, really good. This was just a well-rounded, impressive Timberwolves win. Overcoming the adversity of awful, terrible, no good, very bad officiating, overcoming the Chris Finch ejection, the not completely falling apart at the end, even though things got a little bit dicey, not getting drawn into the web of Devin Booker. And by the way, Devin Booker had 9 turnovers, which is just perfect, given the way he was trying to game things. Oh, he always does, right? And he only had 5 free throw attempts, which is still probably too many based on how he played. But he had 8 assists. He had 9 turnovers. So if you think the 7 turnovers are bad, 9's worse. But anyway, well-rounded win for Minnesota. Their stars played well. Rudy had a quiet night, but he was fine. I mean, Nickeil great off the bench. Fun to see Clark and Dillingham play meaningful and do a good job playing meaningful rotation minutes. The Jazz game, just very quickly, Utah's had a bunch of guys in and out of the lineup. Markkanen didn't play the other night. He'll probably play. But like Walker Kessler's questionable. He may not play. John Collins is questionable. Didn't play last time out. Jordan Clarkson didn't play last time out. It's a rotating cast of guys for Utah. If their full team was healthy and they chose to play them all together, it would be a bit more of a contest. As it is, the Wolves are 7.5-point favorites on FanDuel. Utah's dead last in offensive turnover rate. They're going to give you the basketball. But they are top 5 in offensive rebound rate and free throw rate. So the Wolves need to crash the glass, the defensive glass, get out in transition, and they need to try their best to defend without fouling. Now, a lot of that is, not all those guys are going to play, right? Like if Markkanen doesn't play, the free throw rate thing's less of a concern. If Jordan Clarkson doesn't play, same deal. Like those are the 2 guys that are tops for them in terms of drawing free throws or generating free throw attempts. The Wolves should be able to run against this team. They should be able to score in the paint against this team. And Utah doesn't generate a lot of turnovers. In fact, they're dead last in defensive turnover rate. So just don't do dumb things like dribble the ball off your foot or throw it into the stands. And you should be all right against this Utah team because they don't steal the ball from you. And they don't score often unless it's off of it's at the free throw line or if it's off an offensive rebound. So just play a solid game. Get some of these young guys some more run. The Wolves should be all right against Utah. I'm curious to see who all plays for the Jazz. But I'm hosting the live postcast again. I did last night. If you missed the postcast, myself and Jack Borman, it's the episode before this in the audio feed. The video is over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. We'll host it live 10:30, 10:45-ish, probably 10 minutes after the game ends Thursday. Wolves Jazz, myself and Jack over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. And again, that audio will be here on this very feed. Will be the next episode in this feed later tonight if you can't catch it live. And then I'll be back on Friday to do the post-game pod from Thursday's game. So lots of me on the feed over the last day and into the next day and a half or so. So appreciate you listening. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also, of course, subscribe to the new Locked On Wolves newsletter at lockedondaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate Wolves and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free at lockedondaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.